afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Maria Rosa, for your introduction, and also thank you to Mrs. Gálvez Muñoz for setting the scene so well. Indeed, I think it's quite important. The Digital Services Act and the sense of urgency is I think not really an issue of discussions anymore, which is great to see across the sectors and the policy making bodies. But we also need to get it right. When Lina Gálvez Muñoz rightly said, we're here in the process of setting maybe a benchmark that will be relevant for the entire globe. We absolutely need to get it right, this one. And we need to see eye to eye on the impact platforms have on many sectors in Europe. And I today will, in my few minutes intervention, focus on the impact that we see online platforms have on the media sector. I represent today the European Broadcasting Union, operating Eurovision and Euroradio, as you can see. Together, we represent public service media companies from 115 countries in and beyond the European Union. That includes, for instance, Spanish members such as Radio Televisión Española, but also a range of other public broadcasters in nearly every member of the European Union. The Digital Services Act is not a media legislation. Let me get that straight. That is obviously very clear to us and to our membership. But the impact, of course, will be huge for us. The internet is not just a place where you trade goods and services, but where you also actually access information, entertainment, and news. There is a very telling figure last year in the Reuters Institute research that shows that most of us, actually, when accessing news online, go often to a so-called side door online. So instead of going to some of our news outlets that we represent, or a commercial media outlet or a publisher, a consumer, an audience in Europe prefers to actually access news to a social network, a news aggregator. So whatever investment that we put in as the EBU membership, but also media or publishing sectors, we still rely quite heavily now on third-party platforms that are often owned by global platforms with gatekeeping power. Brings us also to the DMA discussion, but that is not for today. So what I'm sharing today is basically a range of experience that have come back from our journalists, from our editors, and also media professionals working across Europe for public media and for the audiences ultimately, because the public service media companies get their mandate, of course, at national level and are actually obliged to cater for a wide range of audiences and catering for quite diverse needs. So actually what happens on these platforms is also a concern and an interest for us as media companies. We all know global platforms have that deciding role that they're playing, the active role that is heavily discussed amongst ourselves here. And it's clear this is an improvement to set a clear set of rules for online platforms to improve their diligence, to improve their obligations, notably when it comes to tackling online illegal content online. So let it be clear, the feedback we got from our membership also involves a lot of illegal content floating around online. That includes, of course, the copyright infringing material, but also plenty of content that actually is cataloged as hate speech, which is illegal under national and EU standards. And a strong stand is needed. I think we all agree there a robust approach is needed, whether it's transparency in Article 13, the traceability that could be beneficial for or applied to all business users in Article 22, and more generally reporting systems and notice and take action systems. So that is an important first message. The second one, which came very strongly back from our membership and from our media professionals, is that the Digital Services Act is also relevant for access to news and ensuring there is access to media online without arbitrary interventions by online platforms. Because our relationship, let's face it, with platforms is sometimes good, but is also a challenge sometimes. We are facing unilaterally imposed terms and conditions, and platforms also have to work out what they consider illegal and lawful themselves. And we increasingly encounter examples where there are such interventions by platforms based on terms and conditions, which mean that media applications, media services, media content is actually removed from platforms, even though it was visible, it was present on there already. And we think that is an issue. We think that's an issue because there is actually a whole range of rules professional standards, ethical standards that apply to media, services, and content. There's a range of acquis there which proves it and continues to be very relevant up to today. So we would hope, our wish is that the Digital Services Act could establish a clear role or rule there in the Digital Services Act, that platforms are not allowed to meddle with content that is coming from media operators and publishing companies that are established in the EU and abide by all regulatory standards and professional standards in Europe and at national level. We come up with a range of examples to demonstrate that, and I'm happy to share with anyone who would show an interest in that. Second of all, there's of course also an issue of building trust with the audiences online. And part of that trust is actually visibility of brands and logos. And that is a very important part of the story, not just for media, I should say, but whenever a business user, is it a media company or another user, goes online to offer services, offer news, offer media content, offer the sale of goods, it is in their interest and in the interest of audience to know who they're dealing with. And we've also come across numerous examples where we feel our logos, our brands were not properly displayed on platforms. So for media, that is a huge issue, as you can imagine. And it really is quite diverse, the set of examples we get. There is actually a large video sharing platform that offers content for kids. And whenever a public broadcaster who have an excellent track record in producing kids content offers it on this video sharing platform, we see that the logos are not properly displayed of the broadcaster that was actually in charge of editing and producing the content. Again, there is an issue there that we need to address, and we feel that the DSA is definitely the right opportunity to address some of those examples. Third point, we take the point that very large platforms are subject to some of the specific rules. On online advertising, for instance, we're very much supporting the direction of travel towards more transparency. We do question maybe the limiting of some of the provisions to only very large platforms. And I'm singling out the example of recommender systems because you also referred to it, Mrs. Gálvez Muñoz, which is for now really restricted to transparency only of recommender systems. And if that is the case, we feel it's quite so crucial that it would need to apply to all online platforms. To tackle some of the unfair practices that are sometimes driven by the application of recommender system, and we refer to our positioning on the Digital Markets Act, because we feel there is a big push there and a big opportunity also to tackle some of the unfair practices that are triggered by the use of recommender systems by global online platforms. Lastly, I think there are technical points to sort, but I think that is just an issue of sitting down and clarifying things on how the Digital Services Act will relate to some of the media regulation already in place. But I think I'm confident, based also on what Ricardo says, that there is probably a genuine commitment to kind of find a solution. On enforcement, I can only tell you that we are functioning in a sector which is heavily regulated. So there's a lot of experience there also working with media regulators on how to sort issues. So we would hope also that is taken into account in setting up a very efficient enforcement and oversight mechanism for the DSA. I'd leave it at that, and thank you so much for your attention.